Welcome back, all. We are the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael,
And I am James.
and today we are discussing another Big Finish release. This one being the Fires of Vulcan, which is the 12th Big Finish release in the main range. It's written by Steve Lyons, released in September of 2000. It's quite a bit shorter than what we had with last time with the Apocalypse element, which that one was, I think, around 2 hours and 20. This one's just about an hour and 44 minutes, which is sort of nice. And what's even sort of nicer is we get the 7th Doctor with Mal as a companion. And this is the first time that Bonnie Langford as Mal has been in a Big Finish release.
Well, I don't know. I think the actress might have been in a Bernice Summerfield one. I'm not sure if she voiced Mal or if she voiced somebody else. I think I did spot that at least the actress was in a Bernice Summerfield one.
Yeah, and the only Big Finish releases that we've listened to have been the ones that we've covered. So we haven't listened to any of the Bernice Summerfield releases, mainly because we haven't read any of the books in which she appeared in, so we have no, hang on the character. So once we actually get an idea maybe of who she is, then we can jump into some. Some of them, such as Kingdom of the Lion, look quite interesting.
I do like the Monoids.
Indeed, the Monoids are an underrated and fun creation. Should really pop up more in Modern Who. But what, James, is the plot of this one?
The plot from Big Finish is as follows. 2,000 years ago, a volcanic eruption wiped out the Roman city of Pompeii from the face of the earth. It also buried the Doctor's TARDIS. Arriving in Pompeii one day before the disaster, the Doctor and Mal find themselves separated from their ship and entangled in local politics. As time runs out, they fight to escape from the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. But how can they succeed when history itself is working against them? I guess, as Jack says, they sort of set the clock for Volcano Day.
Oh, snap. It's getting some volcano up in this, but yeah.
Well, think about it, Jack sort of been there around the time, at least 3 times. He said so himself. And also, funnily enough, the 10th Doctor is also there with Dana. So really, it should be quite crowded. I would like to see an audio one day with all 3 of them meeting, even though we've seen basically the entire 7th Doctor story here.
Yeah, and actually what's sort of related to that, because I also am curious, I have to admit I don't know much about the whole Pompeii incident. Like, I know there's a city that was covered in volcanic ash, and that's pretty much the extent to my knowledge. What I didn't know is, one, I guess I had in my mind a much more grand, a grand scale, because the city was only about, say, 10, 15,000 people or so, based on modern estimates. And I think only about, 2,000 or 3,000 people actually died. The rest were able to evacuate. And who's to say how many died, maybe evacuated, so we may not have a clear number. But point being, it's not great, but it's not quite as bad as I thought it was. My main point being, though, that because there's only a population of maybe 15,000, I have to imagine if there were 2 doctors plus Jack, they would have run into each other in some capacity.
They should just try to find a suave guy who's probably with 5 women, probably 2 men.
One thing that I think is quite interesting about this story, it's a pure historical, which I didn't know going in. I sort of suspected, but I didn't actually know if they're going to go a fully pure historical route, but they indeed did. And like we've mentioned before, these are those stories that focus primarily on pure history as opposed to science fiction. There's no Pyro Vale trying to do his own stuff.
I mean, technically they are.
Well,
they just didn't know about it.
Yeah, but I mean in the scope of the story, though, aside from, of course, the TARDIS bringing them here, there's no science fiction elements. So I think it worked nice for this story. I'm trying to think, have you seen the 7th Doctor in many pure historicals that come to mind?
I think this has to be the first one.
Elements of Silver Nemesis sort of fit, but then the other elements don't.
I mean, elements of Doubt and Abandonment sort of fit.
God, if you were to call the 50s historical, but yeah, I guess. But yeah, the fact that it's I think, second pure historical after the main conspiracy. I may be missing one in there. I think it's sort of fun. And I know that Big Finish does more pure historicals later on, mostly with the 5th Doctor, it seems, but we will get there when we see it. And actually, speaking of which, if you are not familiar with your Roman gods, Vulcan is apparently the Roman god of fire and furnaces, is one of the characters that I have to imagine. Fires of Vulcan, indeed. And ironically, Vulcan, did it even come up? It was mostly around Isis and the Triad, but I guess Vulcan makes the most sense
Well, a polytheistic world like this, it's not like they didn't believe in Vulcan. It's just that we need to talk about Vulcan when you could talk about battle gods like Jupiter.
Yeah, I think that's one of the more interesting things about this story because, well, like Jim said, this is a city of only about 15,000 people or so, and it's very accepting of different religious beliefs. The main, I guess you could say, antagonistic force is a woman named Eumakia who worships, I think they called it the triad, trio of gods. It's Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. And then there's another character, Sarcinus, who primarily worships Isis. And I imagine he worships other gods, but seems to put most of his faith in Isis. And I guess Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva are a higher class of gods, because Eumakia isn't particularly fond of Sarcinus's beliefs. Her exact quote, and I wrote it down because I thought it was funny: "You worship a foreign deity of the lower classes." That's some God religious acceptance right there.
And classism as well.
Yeah. Well, this is a society in which the wealthy had slaves, and she had a group of slaves. So, yeah, she was much of a woman of the world.
But she was a woman of the triads, and that's what truly matters, especially in that society. So the way this story is told out, it's one of those, I'll call them cold opens, isn't that quite the right term in this context, but where the doctor doesn't appear. And in fact, the doctor doesn't really appear in this time at all, except at the very end, perhaps. But we just see I believe he's an Italian archaeologist and somebody from UNIT who apparently appeared elsewhere in Doctor Who continuity, but I don't really know the character. They're discussing something the scientist is just in Langford, and it is, in fact, the TARDIS, as the plot description says, which has apparently been buried underneath rubble in Pompeii and buried in ash for over 2,000 years, or about 2,000 years, which is, kind of concerning. I just like how it's set up because the unit person from unit walks away, and the archaeologist is wondering, "Wow, unit be concerned about some fun box?" And then it goes on to where the Doctor and Mal are, and I just thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, it was sort of a nice atmospheric opening. One thing that probably ties into that is that the music throughout this whole story is pretty good. It's done by, I think, Alistair Locke. And I'm not sure if we've heard other music by them in previous stories, but I know they come up again later on. But the music throughout the story is pretty nice, and that's a pretty nice atmospheric opening. And it's one of the things, like, just a 2-minute opening sort of drags you in, like, oh, hey, this sounds quite interesting. And it also ties in quite a lot with, I guess, one of the main themes of the story. And that's that when the Doctor and Mal arrive in Pompeii and the Doctor realizes where they are, he suddenly becomes sort of, what would you say, somber?
Well, very, very brooding.
Yeah, brooding, somber, sort of quiet, sort of accepting. Because apparently, I think it was during his 5th incarnation, he was told about a TARDIS being found in Pompeii. So the fact that he's here now, he believes that it's unavoidable, that Pompeii is going to be buried in rubble, and that's sort of, I guess, where they die. Yeah, so history has written it, so it shall be done.
Yeah, he's very fatalistic. Once he realizes, oh, it's the day before the volcano goes off. Oh, we lost track of where my TARDIS was due to the local politics / religious battles. I mean, not battles, but battles of words. So the Doctor just basically goes to a bar and mops for a while, thinking, oh, I can't do anything about it. Oh, the future's already been written. I can't change it. And Mal makes, to me, some gold points. She says to the Doctor, once he somehow knows who Unit is, and we certainly never saw Mal with Unit, so that's kind of interesting. But she says to the Doctor, oh, it could have just been a phone box made you look like a TARDIS. Maybe somebody carved it. I forget what other possibilities she gave. Because the Doctor says when he's informing Mal of why he's so down, that he never actually went to look at it. He was just told about it by the Brigadier. But he never wanted to see anything more from his future. Although I guess now that I think about it, could be his past. This could have been the fugitive Doctor going to Pompeii. We need that story.
We'll probably get it at some point.
I think they have actually finally announced the fugitive Doctor Big Finish audio dates. Only took them 2.5 years. And the Doctor, he talks about something I find extremely fascinating, and it's probably come up before. In fact, I think it had to have come up in our Father's Day discussion. But he talks about I don't know if there's a exact term for it, but the paradox loop. Because Melanie asks, well, why did you just, as soon as you realized where we were, why did we just go? And the Doctor tells her, if he had tried to avoid the event because of his future knowledge, of what was going to come, then the TARDIS wouldn't have been trapped under the rubble for 2,000 or so years. And if it hadn't been trapped under the rubble for 2,000 years, he would have known to avoid the event. So he would have just gone as he normally would have, which would have caused the TARDIS to be trapped under the rubble. So it just creates a whole paradox loop. And then, as you know, paradox loops, that means Reapers. Now, probably not in this case because the Time Lords are still around. But I like to think the Reapers would have tried to come around for this paradox loop.
Yeah, I think it would have given a little extra oomph to the last episode. Like, are the ashes falling from the skies, and then the also Reapers taking people?
Yeah, nobody sees it because they can't see through the ash.
That would be fire as a kid. So I would like that.
I mean, honestly, the last episode, it wasn't my favorite, but it was pretty atmospheric. Apparently, they were wading through knee-high ash trying to find a crypt. And that doesn't sound very fun. And you can't see it all around you. It's all hazy. It's ash. So...
Yeah, I think one of the most amusing things about it, I don't want to say that the last episode, the end is anticlimactic, but we don't actually see the Doctor and company. Well, we don't see anything because it's an audio. It's one of my little jokes. We're not there when the Doctor and Mal actually find the TARDIS. It sort of skips forward a bit, and they talk about how they did find the TARDIS and how they're back in, I guess not present day, but in 1981 or something like that. I guess I didn't need to show all of it. We had enough atmosphere already, but I did find that sort of amusing.
And I found that an extremely awkward way to do it, which is fine because at the end of the day, I guess nothing happened during that time. They just somehow in time found the vault they were looking for and found the TARDIS. I don't know if we should spoil how the Doctor and Mal get out of the predicament, but it includes the most precise piloting of the TARDIS I have ever known the Doctor to commit.
Yeah, but if a Doctor was to do it, I do believe the 7th Doctor could.
That is probably very true. I don't see the second Doctor being able to pull that off.
I mean, you have seen like modern day Doctors, like I think Tennant catching river sound in space and stuff like. Well, I guess that was Smith. You've seen modern day Doctors do pretty impressive timing with the TARDISes.
My favorite thing was when the Doctor. It was maybe one of the best parts of Fairhole, but at the very beginning when the Doctor lands the TARDIS. But they open the door and they're just facing a wall. So they dematerialize away and then materialize back and then walk out. I thought that was genuinely hilarious.
Yeah, that's like a small thing. That was really fun. You see it a couple of times in Classic Who too, when the TARDIS just lands in the completely inhospitable place. Like, I think it's the beginning of the Power of Kroll. It just lands in like a fucking swamp type thing. And they have to wade out to get anywhere. So it's so fun.
And I believe because of the swamp, they could use Kanan and Owl because there's no way Kanan could get around in that.
That's a good production usage of the swamp right there.
Spoilers a lot for the way far future navigate to the Keys of Time. At least I don't know as much about my brother, but I know Power of Kroll is regarded as the worst part of the Keys of Time. I genuinely like the Power of Kroll. I'm not going to say it's the best one or anything, but I think it's actually a really good story with some amazing political writing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole of the Key to Time is a pretty strong story, but like Jim said, we'll talk about that down the road. And one other thing I wanted to mention was that the cliffhanger for the second episode I thought was really strong. Because when I'm listening to these, I try to sort of envision what's happening. And it's still like a learning curve trying to get into like audio-only material, though it's getting easier. But in the cliffhanger of the second episode, Mal and the Doctor are about to... Well, actually, what are they doing? The TARDIS is buried, so where are they going?
They're just trying to leave. I don't know if they were going anywhere in particular. Maybe they're going back to the bow.
Like, just try to leave Pompeii before the thing goes off? Or...
I mean, I don't know if they're going to try to leave Pompeii. I think they're just going back to the bow to recuperate. Or not so much recuperate, but to just discuss what they're going to do. And maybe run into Marinus again, who was one of my favorites.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point. We haven't touched on the characters yet, and I guess I'll do that in a few moments. Yeah, the Doctor and Mal just got out of a dinner with Eumakia and another character I mentioned, Socinus. And Eumakia, well, I guess to back up a little, when they first landed here, I forget if it was the Doctor or Mal, but probably the Doctor said that they came as servants of Isis because they were seen by a slave, and they had to explain, well, hey, this back's coming out of nowhere. They had to explain how they got there. So the Doctor just said, hey, I'm a servant of Isis. And unfortunately, that type of thing in a city of 15,000 gets around. Like, oh, hey, there's servant of Isis here. That's sort of interesting.
Yeah, especially in a polytheistic society where people actually believe that servants of these gods exist and walk around.
Yeah, and it's even worse for the people who don't believe. Like Eumakia. Like I said, Eumakia worships Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. She has no interest in any foreign deity of a lower class.
I'll point out, she doesn't disbelieve, at least, that they think that they are from Isis. I'm not even convinced she disbelieves in Isis himself, but she just thinks that Isis isn't a god worth worship, which is very different from your modern day monotheistic religions.
Yeah, she has her true beliefs. Yeah, it's interesting. But the Doctor and Mal had a dinner with Yumakia. Yumakia doesn't much care for them, so Yumakia frames Mal. I think that claiming that she stole some jewelry and such. So at the end of the second episode, as the Doctor and Mal are going back to where they're going, they're sort of stopped by some Legionnaires, and Mal is arrested. And it's sort of dramatic because she's been taken to a jail cell where, of course, she'll be the following day when the volcano goes off. So in a way, she's sort of been locked to her death. No one else knows, of course, the volcano is going to go off tomorrow. So she's like screaming, and the music's going. It's a strong ending for episode 2, and I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, honestly, again, like Michael said, the music is just amazing throughout. It really is. I'm not familiar. I don't think we've listened to anything else done by this composer, but it was really strong throughout this story. Maybe one of my favorite things about it, honestly.
This was probably something I should have done a bit earlier. I got a bit ahead of myself. But just to quickly go through the important cast of this episode, naturally, like we said, we have Sylvester McCoy and Bonnie Langford as the Doctor and Mal. Yumakia, who's one of the main antagonistic forces, is voiced by Elisa Harlander. Agley, who is a slave who sort of befriends Mal. And I sort of like the friendship. I sort of wish we saw a bit more of Agley. But she was voiced by a Jama Bissix. Salsinus was voiced by an Andy Coleman. He's another character who I actually like this passage toward the end. And then these two characters who we haven't touched on yet, but we're just about to. This is Valeria, who is voiced by Nikki Goldie. She's sort of a barmaid. She runs a bar. And then there's a Marinus, who's voiced by Stephen Wickham. And he's sort of, a gladiator, I guess he would be.
Yeah, he's a Roman gladiator who was a champion of the Colosseum. Yeah, I just found this character, Marinus, pretty funny. Because in the very first episode, the Doctor... I didn't even catch it at first. It's funny how it happens because it didn't even really need to happen. The Doctor basically just wants to drink wine with Mal and discuss things. I don't think there's any bigger motivations than that. But of course, he didn't have any money. So he just goes gambling with Marinus. And because he doesn't have anything to offer, he's like, you can have Mal, my slave, if I lose. And of course, Mal's like, I'm not a slave. But then she plays along. Out of any companion you call a slave, I don't think Mal would be the one to do it. So, of course, the Doctor wins. But it turns out he used a loaded die just to win a gambling thing so he would have some money. And then he gets Mal some clothes that help her fit in more to the society they're in. Then Marinus realizes a bit later on that he was cheated. And so the Doctor's not even around at this point. For 2 whole episodes, he's declaring revenge on the Doctor until he finally gets Valeria to... And she doesn't want to. But he gets her to drag the Doctor so he can kidnap him right before the whole volcano kind of kicks off. Which is really awkward timing because the Doctor had a lot he wanted to do. But he was completely out of nowhere, taken out of the game for a bit. I thought Marinus was hilarious. He was just so cocky, and I love the voice acting. Literally, he was never going to get what he wanted. There was I can't even say there's good times for him because, of course, he convinces all of his warrior bros to stay behind. And of course, if you stay behind, you get turned into us, basically. It wasn't quite that bad, but I'm pretty sure the people who stayed behind in Pompeii were the ones who died, as they say in the story. Yeah, he doesn't have a happy ending.
Yeah, he's almost like, what do they call it? It's like a trope, the first disc final battle or something like that.
Oh, yeah. That's close enough to the trope name, that.
He's sort of like that, only they never really fight Yumakia. Pretty much, the ending sort of, again, I don't want to call it anticlimactic, but Mal is trying to find the TARDIS. Like James said, Mal is the one who's sort of, the Doctor toward the end starts believing it again, and he's trying. But Mal is really a lot more actiony here. She's trying to find the TARDIS. She doesn't know where the Doctor is, but she thinks if she can find the TARDIS and get the Doctor, that they can make it out. And we're talking like very tight constraints because it's already raining ash. So it's, like I said, atmospheric. But Mal pretty much goes to Yumaki's house, says, hey, where's the TARDIS? Yumaki is like, hey, get out of my house. But the Legionnaires are a bit preoccupied, so no one's taking her out. So Mal is able to speak to a slave and say, hey, where's the TARDIS? And the slave reluctantly tells her, then she leaves. So Yumaki, it's not like this ever and you find a showdown. In fact, the Doctor never sees Yumaki again. So it's just sort of strange. And I wonder if they could have structured it maybe a bit differently. But at the same time, being a pure historical, I sort of, it makes sense that it would play out like a comic book story. There'd just be more like a naturalistic chain of events leading. So it makes sense in that aspect.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a very strange structure to me. I didn't hate it and think it worked out fine enough. And I guess in the end of the day, Yumaki was never going to be the final big bad. I was kind of going to be just a volcano because they needed to figure out a way to get out in time. Yeah, I don't know. I thought the ending, the last episode was among the weaker episodes, but it also again had all the cool scenery with them going through the ash to try to get you safety. So you have to take the gold with the bad.
Before we get to the timeline, James, I think there was some TARDIS Wiki news you wanted to discuss.
Yes, it's very unlikely that we'll be the first people you hear this from, but maybe you won't know this because you're not on any Doctor Who Twitter or Facebook or whatnot. But the TARDIS Wiki, which is a source we use for our timeline discussions, has changed. It has now split off from Fandom, which is where it has been hosted for a long time, and now it is its own website. The fandom, because of how fandom works, the fandom version of TARDIS Wiki will still be staying up. It'll just be not kept up to date because all the others are moving over to TARDIS.wiki is the site name for the official TARDIS Wiki non-fandom. So, because of the way it works, TARDIS Wiki is going to be basically competing with itself in the search engines, whatever you use, be it Google, and I'm sure there's others besides Google. Is Excite still around? I don't know. Nobody does. So, just as a public service announcement, I really do like the TARDIS Wiki a lot. There is tons of information on it from everywhere and everything across the Doctor Who universe. Just whenever you try to use the TARDIS Wiki, I mean, I guess I can't make you, but I'm always going to be taking the extra time to go to the TARDIS.wiki site and make sure I don't use the fandom site anymore, because that will help more travelers get to the real updated TARDIS Wiki, and I think it will help all around. I think they have, if you want to read it, a Twitter thread on why they decided to split from fandom, and we won't get into all of that stuff, but I just thought that we could make a small public service announcement about that, and maybe, reach the few people who listen to us.
Yeah, and from what I can understand, nothing's going to change insofar as the way the wiki operates. Like, how the information is transferred over to the new site, the timeline's still there, everything seems to me intact. So nothing should fundamentally change, but it's certainly worth noting. Because theoretically, the fandom wiki won't be updated nearly as much anymore, so there may be some older information if you happen to use that one. With that out of the way though, James, what was the timeline on this one?
As listeners know, the TARDIS Wiki, as we were just discussing, has a personal timeline page for each Doctor and many other species, including the extensive extended media ranging from the comic books, the comic strips, Big Finish and BBC audio, the multiple book ranges and everything in between. Doctor Who canon is a jumbled mess and has been forever, basically. I believe there's still 3 Atlantises. So it's just fun to see where the stories of the discussion fit into the universe as a whole, since it is hypothetically supposed to be a cohesive timeline. As continuity in the narrative structure has always been of personal interest to me in more than just Doctor Who. Like I've always said, the Batman Chronology Project is also a really good source. But with that out of the way, this story, unlike a lot of Seventh Doctor stories, in fact, unlike all of the ones we've listened to so far, because those have involved Ace, this one takes place not after survival, but in between Doctor and the Bannerman and Dragonfire. But it's Doctor Who, so it's not always that easy. Right before the Fires of Vulcan, according to the well-researched people who work on the TARDIS Wiki's personal timeline pages, is the short story Uranus. It's from the anthology book Short Trips the Solar System, which is the 14th anthology novel by Big Finish. And they released, 28, 29 anthology novels?
I think it was 28 and then 29 was sort of like a compilation of the quote-unquote past stuff.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah, and these are the ones, we've mentioned them before. You want to buy them in the United States, you're going to pay upwards of probably $40 for one of the cheaper ones. And sometimes you're going to be paying over $200. There are some I've literally never been able to find just looking on eBay. Now, granted, I'm maybe looking at the wrong times, but yeah, these are cheap in the United States. I don't know how many were produced, but doesn't seem like they were enough. Or if they were, it seems like many people don't want to part their ways with them. But
Yeah, and maybe they just never made their way across the pond.
well, that's always true. But yeah, so this story right before Fires of Vulcan is Uranus, which is one of the stories in the solar system, which is, well, I believe each story is named after a planet in the solar system. So that's exciting. And this novel came out October 22nd, 2005. So shortly after the Revival series, actually. It might have actually been one of the first books after the Revival series started, but maybe not. There might have been one in between. They did do like one every 4 months or so. And right after the fan of the Fires of Vulcan, we get another Big Finish audio series from After the Main Range, the 85th one, in fact. A story called Rad, which tells me nothing, but it also features, of course, the Seventh Doctor and Maul. And that came out August 28th, 2006. And as the title of the story implies, the castle is in fact very rad. So I guess it fits in with Maul with her hair color.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that story, but I do feel like I recognize that title. Maybe it's just because it's a very common color, and I just know the word "rat." But
That's always
I do.
possible. I mean, the thing is, there are so few Seventh Doctor Maul stories, and maybe that's why it's a bit more recognizable too. I know there's also Bang Bang a Boom, but I'm pretty sure that one takes place before the Fires of Vulcan. And there are also, of course, a few Sixth Doctor and Maul stories, but obviously those take place long before this as well.
Yeah, and when it comes to this story, The Fires of Vulcan, I think it's a pretty solid story. I don't think it's an amazing story, but I think it's pretty good. I sort of like how the Doctor's, I don't want to say giving up, but he sort of does in a way give up for a bit. And Mal is sort of like the hopeful, shining light.
To be fair, that fits with Maul's personality.
It's also interesting that Mal's vegetarian, which sort of pops up here during the whole dinner scene.
Yeah, although I'm pretty sure we learned that as early as Terror of the Voids, which was her very first story, but it's always nice to have it be mentioned again.
Yeah, keeping what small character traits class companions got and bringing them into audio. At least they get something, but...
Yeah, do you remember that she's a computer programmer? Now, granted, there's literally no place for that to come up in this one, but still.
Has it come up anywhere?
I don't remember.
I guess maybe the giggle, she did finally do something on the computer, I guess.
I mean, it did come up in the beta read of the Amazing, but I've not read more than 50 pages. Well, okay. Maybe I've read 100 pages. I don't remember. But Millennial Rights, or Millennium Rights, or whatever that one's called, that one's really good.
Which is a, if I recall, mission adventure.
Yeah, that one's telling the Sixth Doctor and Maul. And like I said, they've only read the first 100 pages, but I found it really fun, actually. But we're not there yet, sadly.
But yeah, I sort of thought it was interesting having Mal sort of take charge for part of this. I thought her, though she wasn't particularly an important character, I guess part-wise she was, but her friendship with Agley I thought was nice too. Agley, like I mentioned before, was a servant slave of someone, and she was fun when she popped up. She would have made a good companion, but I feel like every other story I say, oh hey, this person would have made a good companion, but it's because it's true.
I mean, look at the Dalek and Dalek. All it wanted was to feel the sunlight. I think he would have made a good companion too.
Oh, that would have been heartwarming too. They reconcile the differences. It's good fan fiction there. I'm not the guy to write it, but I'm sure someone
I'm not
is.
sure anybody is.
I think the story is pretty solid. I sort of like the fact it's a pure historical. The Doctor's fatalistic attitude's fun. The whole thing with Marinus wanting revenge on the Doctor because he's just a little bitch. I think it's so funny. I mean, there's more to it than that, but he's like this big, strong gladiator man. And he can't deal with the fact that this little man beat him and dies. Like, dude, shut the hell up. He's just I can't stand that guy. I mean, he's funny, but I just can't stand that guy. Like James said, it is pretty tense in the end, though, when he gets the Doctor dragged, when the Doctor's on like a very tight time constraint. So that is pretty solid. I think it's a pretty solid story. It's not great, but I enjoyed it. Having Mal here was fun, and I mean, I don't think Mal's ever going to come close to ever competing with Ace, but it's nice to have the occasional Seventh Doctor Mal story, so I can't complain.
And for me, I quite like this. Well, like I said, the ending was a bit anticlimactic, but even that aside, it does have extremely good music. And like I said, that is maybe the best thing about this story, at least for me. I really do think every Doctor should experience at least one pure historical, just because I do think, one, it takes good talent to write a pure historical and to figure out what type of situations a Doctor would be in for that pure historical. I mean, we had the first Doctor and the second Doctor both on TV. They had pure historicals, but then we did have another one, and that's the one to call Black Orchid. So imagine Tom Bagan just a pure historical. It'd be kind of a strange thing to think about, but maybe you got Afro Martin Luther King a Jolly Baby. Or maybe you don't make it MLK Jr. But yeah, I don't know. It's never going to be one of my favorite Big Finish stories we've listened to. I probably like it more than American Conspiracy. I think that was fun mostly because one of the conversation the Doctor had, well, there was more than one, but with Queen Mary. And also, just because I do think it was a good introduction to Eveline. I think this was certainly better written and better well constructed, and it fit together nicer than that one did. Like I said, I believe that one has at least one or two major plot holes, which I just can't reconcile. At least one major plot hole and one really annoying thing that might not be a plot hole, but they annoyed me. But this one, it all fit together in the end, and the Doctor did kind of annoy me with how morose he was being, but I guess, hey, this is the Seventh Doctor. He gets to have a midlife crisis. It's a good enough time for one. Yeah, on the whole, I thought it was a nice story. It's pretty cheap if you were to pick it up. Especially if you're interested in this or the type of culture, especially if you like historicals. I'd say it could do a lot worse than this one. So it has the James seal of approval.
Naturally, though, that is what we thought about this one. If you've happened to listen to this, what was it, the 12th Big Finish release?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, if you've happened to listen to this early release, Fires of Vulcan, let us know what you thought. I'm also curious about how these were, I guess, taken when they first came out, especially because I know that this actually came out on cassette tape, and it's just wild for me to imagine somebody actually listening to this on cassette tape. So that amuses me. So yeah, if you've listened to this one or have any thoughts, certainly let us know either here or on Twitter, where you could follow us at Brothers Mahoney. But yeah, that has been the Fires of Vulcan. What did we have coming up next, James?
Coming up next is the 14th novel in the Words and Mission Adventure series from 1995 September, Monogra by Stephen Mowley, who is not a name at all I am familiar with, but I've read the first 100 pages and I think it's actually quite fascinating so far. And it's going to be our second novel discussion of our incident after the Wheel of Ice.
Yeah, and if you were there during our Wheel of Ice conversation, that sort of was all over the place, so we are hoping to streamline this a bit.
No promises about that.
It might take us a little bit to nail down exactly how best to approach talking about novels, but we do hope to make it at least a little more, I guess, digestible than what Wheel of Ice might have been.
Yes, but Monogra, like I said, 1995, featuring the 4th Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith.
Which is naturally a very classic theme.
It is indeed, and it has a very gothic feel of, what was his name, Hinchcliffe?
Yeah, it would have been perfect during his time.
Yes, it really would have been. I always like when I'm reading these stories, well, I've only read two, but I always like to imagine how they would have been done in the time of the Doctor. And it would be just fascinating to see this story into a 6th-part 4th Doctor story. But up next is indeed Monogra, so that'll be exciting.
So be there and be ready. But as always, that has been the Brothers Mahoney. I am Michael.
And I am James.
We thank you for listening and have yourself a pleasant night.